This house wasn't on any modern map. No roads led to it. No one had spoken its name in decades, but the table was still set for dinner, as if the family inside had never left. Or maybe they never could. Welcome to the Ghost Vault, where we explore true and disturbing stories hidden in the forgotten corners of the Appalachian Mountains. If you enjoy unsettling tales of abandoned places, unsolved disappearances, and things that watch you from the dark, consider subscribing and join us as we uncover what was never meant to be found. My name is Thomas Archer. I'm 26 years old, and I've been working as a freelance forestry surveyor for a little over 4 years now. Most of my contracts are pretty uneventful, hiking out to mark property boundaries, documenting tree health checking for signs of invasive species. It's quiet work, which is exactly why I took it in the first place. In late October of 2019, I got a call from a private landowner who claimed he'd inherited a large tract of forest near the Kentucky side of the Appalachians. He said he wanted it surveyed before winter set in. The pay was good, and I was between gigs, so I agreed. He emailed over a rough boundary map and a list of old structures on the property, most of them hunting shacks and storage sheds that hadn't been used in decades. One of them was just marked Old Callahan House. I didn't think much about it at the time. Places out here have names that stick around long after the people are gone. I packed up my gear maps, a hand-drawn chart of the property lines, a few days' worth of food, and my old Nikon to document any structures I found. It took the better part of a day to get to the edge of the property. The roads grew narrower and rougher, eventually turning into a single-lane dirt track carved into the hillside. I parked near a rusted gate with a no trespassing sign, so faded you could barely read it. From there, I started hiking. The air was sharp and cold, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and lingers. The leaves were past their peak color, brittle underfoot, and the trees grew so close together in places that the light thinned to a gray haze. By mid-afternoon, I documented 2 collapsed sheds and the remains of what looked like an old corral. My GPS wasn't much help. The satellite signal in these hills is spotty at best, so I was relying mostly on compass bearings and my printed map. I kept moving east toward the area marked Callahan. After about another hour, I noticed something strange. The trees began to thin, and a narrow clearing opened up, ringed by tall pines. There, half sunk into the ground and almost hidden under decades of leaf litter, stood a cabin. Even from a distance, I could tell it was old. The roof had partially caved in along one side, and the logs were stained nearly black with rot. But the front door was still standing. In fact, it looked intact, like someone had propped it closed not too long ago. I stood at the edge of the clearing for a minute, studying the place. My first thought was that it might be unsafe to enter. Structures this old can fall in on you if you so much as sneeze in the wrong spot. But I needed photographs and notes for the survey, so I walked up slowly, testing each step in case the ground was hollow underneath. When I reached the porch, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. There were footprints in the dirt, faint but visible, leading up the steps. They didn't look fresh, maybe a few weeks old at most, but they were clear enough that I could see the tread pattern from a boot. Someone had been here recently. I tried the door. It creaked but swung open with less resistance than I expected. The smell that rolled out was like damp paper and something faintly sour. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was how intact everything seemed. The furniture was coated in a thick layer of dust, but it was all there. A table with 6 chairs, a wood-burning stove, a cabinet with the doors hanging crooked. Along the back wall, a series of framed photographs were still nailed in place. I stepped closer to look. They were black and white portraits, formal stiff poses of a family. A man and woman, 3 children. The smallest kid couldn't have been more than 3 or 4. On the table, 6 plates were arranged neatly, each with a tarnished fork and knife laid beside it. For a moment, it almost looked like someone had set the table for dinner and then simply walked away forever. I felt a chill run up my spine. I reminded myself that this was probably just how the place was left when whoever lived here abandoned it. But there was something too deliberate about it, like it was preserved waiting. I took a few photos of the table, the photos on the wall, and the stove. Then I noticed a small, leather-bound book near the center of the table, next to one of the plates. It looked too clean compared to everything else, like it had been handled more recently. I picked it up and flipped it open. The pages were brittle and yellowed, but the handwriting inside was surprisingly clear. The first few entries were mundane notes about the harvest, the weather, the children's birthdays. But as I skimmed further, the tone shifted. The entries grew shorter, the handwriting more hurried. One line was repeated over and over. They come at night. They stand by the trees and watch. They come at night. They come at night. I closed the book and set it back down. My hands were shaking, though I couldn't have said exactly why. Maybe it was the cold, or maybe it was the way the air in that cabin felt heavy, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. I was about to step back onto the porch when I heard it, a soft, slow creak. The unmistakable sound of wood shifting under weight. It came from the far corner of the room, near a high-backed rocking chair facing the window. I turned the flashlight toward it, heart hammering so hard it made my vision blur. The chair was still. Nothing else moved. But in that moment, I had the distinct, gut-deep certainty that I was not alone in that cabin. I kept the flashlight fixed on that rocking chair, refusing to blink. For a moment, the only sound was my own heartbeat, so loud I could feel it pulsing behind my eyes. The chair didn't move in again, and I told myself it must have been the cabin settling some shift in the damp timbers. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I wanted to turn around and leave. Every part of me was screaming to walk out the door back to the clearing and never look back. But a smaller voice inside insisted I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen all this. I was supposed to be documenting the property. If I left now, I'd be lying when I submitted the report. So I forced myself to step deeper into the room. My boots left clear prints in the dust, fresh proof I'd been here. The air grew colder as I moved. The smell of mildew thickened until it was all I could taste. Along the far wall, next to the rocking chair, was a low doorway. The door itself hung open, revealing a narrow set of stairs that disappeared into darkness. The cellar. I knew I should have just turned around, but something pulled at me, a need to understand what had happened in this place. I shined my light down the steps. The beam didn't reach the bottom. It just swallowed itself in the dark, like the earth had opened a mouth and waited. I hesitated, then descended one step, then another. Each board protested under my weight with a long groan. When I reached the halfway point, I smelled something different, faintly metallic, like old blood. My foot hit the packed dirt floor. I swung the flashlight in a slow arc. The cellar was larger than I'd guessed, almost the size of the main room above. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with jars whose labels had long since peeled away. A large wooden chest sat under the stairs, its lid slightly ajar. I didn't want to look inside, but my legs moved before I decided anything. I knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were toys, old dolls, with porcelain faces cracked like eggshells, wooden blocks, a tiny stuffed rabbit, missing one ear. All of them arranged in neat rows. I thought about the photographs upstairs, the three children. I let the lid fall shut and stood. That was when I heard it again. Not a creak this time. A voice, soft, almost tender. "We see you." I spun the flashlight beam, jerking across the cellar. There was no one, just shadows and the stale smell of earth. I backed toward the stairs, heart slamming. I'd had enough. Whatever story lay buried here, it wasn't mine to uncover. I turned and scrambled up the steps, two at a time. As I reached the main floor, I felt a pressure at my back, like hands almost touching me, but never quite. When I stepped into the daylight, the cold air hit my face so sharply I nearly sobbed with relief. I didn't look back at the cabin. I couldn't. I just walked. It took longer to retrace my route than I remembered. The light was already fading by the time I found my truck. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it with both hands, willing my pulse to slow. When I got home that night, I tried to write my report, but the words wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that table, those plates, the cracked doll faces in their box, and I heard the voice. I ended up sending a brief email to the landowner, survey complete. Structures in poor condition. Recommend demolition. I never mentioned the cellar, or the photographs, or the voice. 3 days later, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the journal I'd left on the table. What if it held something important? Some record of what had happened to that family at midnight. Against every instinct I had, I pulled the photos off my camera and zoomed in on the journal. The entries I'd read were clear, but below them, near the bottom of the page, was a final line I hadn't noticed before. "If you read this, it's too late. They already know you." That was the last time I ever set foot near that property, and sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear the chair creak in the dark. My name's Nathan, and this happened to me about 4 years ago, right before everything started going wrong in my life. I've told people parts of it, how I ended up stranded on that mountain road, how the engine in my truck died without any warning, but I've never really laid out the entire story. Not because I don't remember. I remember everything. That's the problem. It was early November, one of those gray Appalachian afternoons where the daylight feels thin, like the sun is just a rumor behind the clouds. I was driving up a narrow 2-lane highway that cut across the ridges between Kentucky and Tennessee. My job back then was delivering specialty machine parts to small fabrication shops and mills, so I'd been on the road for hours, crawling past towns you wouldn't find on any tourist map. That stretch of highway was always half empty, just the occasional logging truck or an old sedan chugging along. Most of the time it felt like you were the only person left alive. I'd planned to get across the pass before dark. Everyone who worked in the area said the same thing: don't linger up there after sundown. They'd offer the advice with a half smile, like they were joking, but you could hear something flat in their voices, like it wasn't a joke at all. I never asked why. Figured it was just another local superstition, something to scare outsiders. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the sky started to darken faster than I'd expected. I remember glancing at the clock on my dashboard and feeling that tight little coil of unease in my gut. I pressed the gas a bit harder, trying to make better time. That's when the truck lurched. Just a single jolt, like hitting a pothole that wasn't there. Then the engine sputtered and cut off completely. No warning lights, no check engine indicator, just dead silence and the feeling that the road had dropped out from under me. I tried the ignition twice. Nothing. I don't know why I thought a third try would change anything, but I did it anyway, turning the key and whispering, "Come on, please." Still nothing. After a minute of sitting there with my hands locked around the steering wheel, I realized the temperature had dropped, not just a little like someone had thrown open a door to winter. My breath started fogging the glass. That didn't make sense either. I hadn't seen a cold front in the forecast. I checked my phone, no service. No surprise. That stretch of road was a black hole for reception. I told myself I'd just walk up the shoulder until I got a signal or flagged someone down. It was still daylight, sort of. I could make it back before it got too dark. I didn't think twice about locking the truck behind me. That was the last normal thought I'd have that day. I started walking, boots crunching over gravel and fallen leaves. The air had this heavy metallic smell, like old pennies or something left to rust in a basement. The farther I went, the quieter it got, until the only sounds were my own breathing and the scuff of my steps. Maybe 20 minutes in, I started noticing marks on the trees. At first, I thought they were just random scars, damage from logging equipment or weather, but they were too deliberate. Each one was the same rough oval shape, maybe the size of a human hand cut deep into the bark. No paint, no obvious symbols, just those ovals over and over every dozen yards or so. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe some forestry marking system I didn't recognize. But the way they lined up along the road, always facing the same direction, made my skin crawl. I walked another half mile. The sun was almost gone now, smothered by the low clouds. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but the cold was seeping in like water. My fingers felt stiff, and every breath came out ragged. I checked my phone again, holding it up higher like that would magically conjure a signal. Still nothing. That's when I heard it, a sound like something moving through the underbrush, maybe 20 feet off the road. Not an animal, it was too big, too deliberate. I stopped, heart slamming against my ribs, and strained to see between the trees. The brush was dense, but for a second I thought I saw movement, a pale shape slipping behind a tangle of bare branches. I called out without thinking, "Hello, do you need help?" Nothing. Just that metallic silence and the fading light. I backed away a step, telling myself it was just a deer, or maybe a lost dog, but I didn't really believe that. I kept walking faster now, trying not to look at the tree line, but the marks kept appearing sometimes, 2 or 3 clustered together. My chest felt tight, and a pressure was building behind my eyes, like I was about to cry for no reason. Then I saw it, a narrow footpath cutting away from the main road, half hidden under dead leaves, and beside it an old wooden sign nailed to a post. The lettering was so faded, it was almost illegible, but I could make out 3 words: Callahan Homestead Trail. I don't know why I left the road. Even now I can't explain it. Maybe part of me thought there'd be a house up there, a phone, a light. Maybe I just couldn't stand the idea of standing still, waiting for something to step out of the trees and find me. So I turned and followed the path, crunching over leaves and old ruts deeper into the woods. The trail felt older than anything I'd ever walked on. The way the ruts curved, the way the roots bulged up through the dirt. It was like the woods were trying to reclaim it, swallow it whole. Every step made me more aware of the dark pressing in around me, the cold biting at my ears. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something following. After maybe 15 minutes, the path widened a little and dipped into a hollow. That's when I noticed how quiet it had become. No birds, no wind, just that same heavy metallic air and the faint throb of my own pulse. Ahead of me in the gloom, I saw the outline of a building. At first, I thought it was a cabin, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else. A squat wooden structure with boards nailed haphazardly over the windows and a front door that sagged on broken hinges. The roof was partly collapsed and a rusted stovepipe stuck out at an odd angle. I stopped about 10 feet away, heart thudding. For a moment, I told myself I'd turn around, that I'd go back to the road, even if it meant walking all night. But then I saw the marks on the walls, the same oval shapes I'd seen on the trees, only here they were bigger, carved deeper. Someone, or a lot of someones, had spent a long time marking this place. I didn't want to go inside. I don't think any sane person would have. But standing there in the cold, staring at that door, I felt a pull, like something was waiting for me beyond the threshold. I took a step closer and tried the knob. It turned in my hand with a soft, gritty scrape. The smell hit me first. Not rot exactly. Something older, like damp earth and mildew, and the stale exhale of a place sealed up too long. I stepped over the threshold and into the darkness. The floor was littered with leaves and bits of broken glass. The walls were lined with shelves, most of them bare, except for a few cracked jars and a coil of rope so old it had fused into a single stiff tangle. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, the surface gouged with deep cuts. On top of it lay a bundle wrapped in canvas. I don't know why I touched it. I'd like to say it was curiosity, but honestly, it felt more like inevitability, like I was acting out something I'd already agreed to. My fingers closed around the canvas and I pulled it open. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, black and white, curled at the edges. The images, fogged with age, faces stared out at me. Some solemn, some smiling, but all wrong in the same subtle way. Eyes set too close together, mouths a fraction too wide, skin pale as candle wax. My stomach turned. I flipped through them faster, hoping to find one that made sense, but every picture felt like a mistake, like whoever took them didn't understand what human beings were supposed to look like. Near the bottom of the stack, I found a different kind of image. A hand-drawn map on yellowed paper, labeled in a shaky scrawl. I couldn't make out all the words, but one phrase stood out, underlined 3 times: Callahan bloodline must end. I let the photos slide from my hands. They landed in a soft flutter on the table. My heart was hammering so hard, it hurt. I turned to leave. That's when I heard the whisper. It came from the far corner of the room, low and ragged, like someone dragging breath over dry glass. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone made my knees buckle. I backed toward the door, eyes locked on the shadows. Something moved there, a slow shift, like a figure uncurling from the dark. I don't remember bolting, but the next instant I was outside, crashing into the cold air. I ran without thinking, stumbling back up the trail, branches clawing my arms and face. I didn't look back. If I looked back, I knew it would follow. The path blurred under my feet. My lungs were fire. All I could think was, get back to the road, get back to the road. When I finally broke out of the trees, the sky was nearly black. My truck sat exactly where I'd left it, windows reflecting the last scrap of light. I sprinted the last stretch and grabbed the driver's side door. My hand froze. There, etched deep into the metal, was the same oval shape, the same mark I'd followed into the woods. I didn't think. I just climbed in, locked every door, and sat there, shaking. Eventually the truck started, though I don't remember turning the key. I drove for miles before I let myself breathe. That night I checked every inch of my skin in the motel mirror, looking for more of those marks. I didn't find any, but even now, sometimes when the light hits my reflection just right, I swear I see them, patterns in my skin that weren't there before. and I never drove that road again. My name's Luke Carter. I'm 35 now, but this happened when I was 27. Back then, I was doing contract work for the state, mostly surveying old properties in western North Carolina. If you've ever driven through those mountains, you know how fast the roads turn into dirt and how easy it is to think you're the only person alive out there. In November of that year, I got a call from my supervisor about an abandoned cabin near a place called Callahan Hollow. The name didn't mean anything to me at the time. He said it needed to be assessed for liability. Someone had reported collapsing, beams, broken glass, that kind of thing. He also warned me the land had no clear owner on file, and the last known deed was over 50 years old. I packed my camera, my logbook, and a thermos of coffee, figuring it would be a boring day. I left Asheville before dawn, took the state highway until it turned into gravel, and kept driving. The farther I went, the less the landscape looked touched by anything human, just trees and gullies and low mist curling across the hood of my truck. When I finally pulled up, the cabin looked worse than I'd pictured. The roof had caved in near the chimney, and the front steps were gone, just damp earth and scattered boards. As I walked around to the side, I noticed something that stopped me cold, a mark carved into the doorframe. An oval shape, deep and precise, exactly like the photos I'd seen in old reports about the Callahan property. I didn't know it yet, but those same marks had shown up in a missing persons case back in the 70s. I took a few photos, logged the damage, and told myself not to overthink it. But the feeling in my gut kept growing, like someone was watching me from inside the trees. I tried the door. It was stuck, but when I put my shoulder to it, it swung open hard enough to slam the wall behind it. The air that rushed out was so cold, it made my eyes water. Inside, the floor was littered with papers and broken dishes. A stained mattress slumped against the far wall, half covered by a moldy blanket. I stepped in, shining my flashlight around, and nearly tripped over a metal box sitting in the middle of the floor. It looked out of place, newer than everything else. I bent down and flipped the latch. Inside were dozens of black and white photographs, all the same size, edges curling with age. Most showed people standing in front of the same cabin, but the faces were wrong. Blurred or distorted, or simply blank. One picture made my breath catch, a family of 5, standing on the porch, all staring straight into the camera, eyes too large. Underneath it, someone had written in faded pencil, "The Last Callahans, 1972. I felt cold seep into my bones then, like the walls themselves were holding a memory no one should have to feel. I put the photo back, but when I looked up, I saw something that hadn't been there a moment before, a shape in the far corner. A person, or what looked like one, just standing watching. My heart slammed against my ribs. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. The figure didn't move. It was almost as if it was waiting for me to do something. Slowly, I backed towards the door, never taking my eyes off that corner. When I was almost out, the thing tilted its head to the side. The motion was so smooth, it made my stomach lurch. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my truck with the door locked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. As I drove away, I made the mistake of looking in the rearview mirror. For one instant, I swear I saw a pale face staring out of the broken window, watching me leave. Back at the office, I tried to report everything, the photos, the marks, the figure. But my supervisor gave me a look that said I'd better think twice. He didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. No one wanted to put that name on record again. In the weeks after, things got stranger. I started finding marks, those same oval carvings scratched into my own front door. Some mornings I'd wake up convinced someone had been in the house. Once I found the same black and white photograph of the Callahan family sitting on my kitchen table, though I'd left every door locked. I still have that photo. I keep it in a drawer I never open. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I hear footsteps on my porch. Always stopping at the door, always waiting. If you ever find yourself near Callahan Hollow, don't stop. Don't take photos. And whatever you do, don't go inside. Because some families never really leave, and some places never forget.